What up? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about this camera right here. This is my brand new, and of course it ain't new, Mamiya C330. And this is a beautiful, big, beefy TLR camera. As you are aware from watching this channel and other episodes, I'm a big fan of TLR cameras at this point. It's something that took me a while to get into, but once I did, I kind of never turned back. And typically I've been shooting the Rolleiflex 2.8, which is a fantastic camera that a friend of mine loaned me, kind of on long-term loan. He wasn't going to use it, and he was like, here you go, take it, do what you got to do with it. And that's what I've been doing. Of course, I wanted to get my own, and the Rolleiflex 2.8 is a fantastic camera, but very pricey. So I figured if I'm going to get my own, maybe I get something a little bit less expensive, and that's where this comes in. This C330 isn't cheap theoretically, but I paid about 500 bucks for this, and it came with another lens as well, which I actually don't have on me right now, so I can't show it to you. But nonetheless, this camera is basically an interchangeable lens medium format TLR camera. And that's quite special because I think the Mamiya C line is basically the only one that does that. So on this one right here, I've got the 80mm lens, which is a fantastic kind of classic focal length for a square format. And the other lens I got was a 250mm lens, which is kind of ridiculous for TLR. And I mean ridiculous in a good way, but I haven't used it at all, so I won't be talking about that here. So this camera, as amazing as it is, mine has one tragic flaw already. And it isn't a flaw that's kind of inherent to the camera, it's just kind of my own bad luck, and that's this right here. This is the winding knob that goes on the side of the camera. So if we look at the camera, this would typically be somewhere right here attached, and you just kind of wind your camera by rotating this, just like that. Only issue is for mine, the little screw that holds this onto that little space on the winder there somehow fell off. I was actually walking around with Pauly B, I'm sorry, and my friend Naeem, who you can check out both of their links here. And basically, we're just kind of cruising around New York City doing some photography, and then out of nowhere, I feel on my hand, and I've got this in my hand, and I'm like, that's not good. And then quickly I realized, okay, the screw fell off somewhere. So I'm not really sure what happened. It was in fantastic condition when I got it. It's not that it was broken or anything, but the screw just kind of mysteriously fell off, and we spent about 10 minutes looking for it. Worthless endeavor, obviously, because how am I going to find such a tiny screw on the pavement in New York City amongst the broken glass and the garbage and all that other stuff? Ultimately, I said, you know what? It's not a big deal. I can figure this out. So I still agree this is not a big deal, but I'm curious if anybody has any recommendations here. A, how can I source the appropriate screw for this? Or perhaps do you have a recommendation for a different type of screw? It's very tiny, probably the size of what you would find on a watch. Or is there some kind of MacGyver solution I can use? Something like a paper clip or wire, I don't know. It's not a massive deal. I can still use the camera, but obviously I don't want to lose this, so I would prefer that it be attached like it's supposed to. All right, enough of that topic. So let's go ahead and talk about the camera itself. As I mentioned, this has the 80mm lens on it, and it's actually a 2.8, which is amazing because 2.8 on a square format at 80mm just gives you this beautiful balance of bokeh and sharpness. And I've got one example photo here that I can show you right now. Fantastic image. It's actually, I made it very moody intentionally, and if you can check out the Instagram post, you'll see the little caption I gave it, which I thought was kind of funny. But anyways, this lens is great, and I'm very excited to really put it through its paces and see how well it performs in a lot of different scenarios. It's kind of a first impression, so I don't have that much more to say just yet. Other things that I really like about this camera are the fact that there's two shutter buttons. So you've got the classic one down here, which is probably how most TLRs function. You hold the camera like this and just press that shutter button. But this one also has a button right here on the thumb. So if I press it down, you can trigger the shutter. And that's awesome because it just kind of gives you what potentially feels like a more natural way of triggering the camera. And it's not something I've seen on any other TLRs. The most signature feature of this camera that everybody talks about is the bellows. So, if we turn this knob here, this is how you focus. But because this camera has bellows, you can actually stick the lens out quite far. And you can see here it's going and going and going, and that's where it ends. These bellows are great, and they allow you to do something really cool, which isn't really possible with most TLRs, and that's macro photography. So you keep extending those bellows out, and you can get closer and closer and closer to your subject. Key thing to understand, of course, is the closer you get to your subject, the more you have to compensate with light in terms of overexposing the image, because the more you move the lens away from the actual film plane, the physics behind that means that the light has to travel longer distance, and I guess it's less impactful. So all in all, it just means you have to calculate your exposure properly and overexpose by whatever the recommended value is. not going to talk more about that because I actually don't know what the recommended value is. I haven't done any macro stuff myself, but when I do a full-blown review on this, I'll kind of give you a bit more detail. Last thing I want to talk about here is the actual viewfinder, the waist level viewfinder up top. It's nice and bright. It's amazingly bright. It's big, and it's pretty cool. The only problem is it's a split prism. I think that's how you call it. And basically you'll see a circle in there with the line. Historically, I always thought that was very useful, but for some reason on this camera, it's not really helping me. And I find like I'm having a bit of trouble focusing on here. I'm just very slow and I second guess myself all the time. And I think perhaps I just don't know how to use the split kind of view there properly. And that's why I'm kind of confused. On the Rolleiflex, there is none of that. It's just, kind of a normal viewing screen there, and there's no marks or anything. So I just use my eye with the magnifying glass and I can tell when I'm in focus or not. And honestly, with the Rolleiflex, I hardly ever miss focus. With this, I don't think I've missed yet, but it's been very frustrating using it and kind of wondering, am I in focus or not? So ultimately, I just have to get used to that. It's something I'm going to work with a bit more, and we'll see. Maybe I figure it out and then it's all good, or I just hate it and then I'm going to complain about it even more. If you've got any recommendations on how that's supposed to work, of course, hit me in the comments because I would definitely appreciate a bit of a lesson there. Last thing to note here about this camera is its size. This camera for a TLR is quite big. It's chunky, it's beefy, it looks nice and kind of like legit. It's got all this metal trim. I think it's a beautiful camera regardless of its size. But it definitely is bigger than what I'm used to with the Rolleiflex. You can see here in this comparison, this is meaningfully bigger than the Rolleiflex. It's heavier as well. But I actually like how, you kind of carry it. It feels nice and dense. And, it just, with the Rolleiflex, sometimes you forget that you're wearing it. That's not a problem, but it's kind of weird sometimes, especially it's not your camera. You want to make sure you're always aware of where it is. With this, you don't forget where it is because it's around your neck and you're like, damn, this is heavy. Those boxing exercises that they do where they go like this with weights on their neck? You can basically do that with this camera. I can, get my neck nice and thick like Mike Tyson. But anyways, the size of this, I thought it'd be something that was going to bother me. And so far, after taking it out once, I've literally only shot one roll of film in this. So far, it wasn't an issue. In fact, I enjoyed having it around my neck. It really felt substantial. The only thing is, when you take it off and put it on the table or something, let's say you stop for a drink or a little bite to eat, it occupies real estate and it's big and it's kind of in the way. But, it is what it is. Nice thing is, though, this camera is nice and modern, I would say, by film photography standards. And therefore, there's a lot of accessories for it. I've got lens covers for this. I'm sure I can probably replace that screen that I was just telling you about. With the Rolleiflex, it's very, very old. And therefore, especially the one I have, I've got the 2.8A. I'm pretty sure that's the A. And because of that, it's the oldest. You can't find basically anything for it. And anything that you can find for it is very expensive because of the scarcity. So it's kind of a nice change of pace, having something a bit more modern, a bit more modular, something that I can kind of mix and match if I need to in case I break something or lose something. So those are my first impressions. I'm very excited to use this camera. So far, so good. A couple quirks that I got to kind of get used to, but I'm really excited to figure this out. Got to figure out this piece, of course, my little winding knob here, but I'm not too worried about it because I can still use the camera in the meantime. It's not the end of the world. All right, y'all, let me know what you think. Definitely got a couple questions in there that I need help with, so shout me some comments there in terms of what you think might help me. And in general, if you do own this camera and you've got any kind of feedback or any, things to note, of course, hit me in the comments and let me know. I definitely appreciate it. All right, y'all, to the next video. I'm out.